What up and welcome back to Mean Joe Video, where we celebrate the classics and lesser known gems. I'm Mean Joe Grizzly, your humble video store clerk and curator of the classics. And we are back to continue our journey through the Friday the 13th franchise with, in my opinion, the peak of the franchise, Friday the 13th, the final chapter. The final chapter picks up where part 3 left off, where we find Jason escaping the morgue, heading back to Crystal Lake to continue his campaign of carnage against a new set of victims for the last time. So let's dust off that old VCR, pop in the tape, and witness the final chapter. Or is it? Picking up immediately after the events of the previous film, Jason Voorhees would escape from the morgue, and after leaving a trail of bodies in his wake, he would return to Crystal Lake to continue his killing spree. But unbeknownst to him, he would meet his match and might just finally be stopped once and for all. So after the financial success of Part 3, Frank Mancuso Jr. decided, with the decline of popularity in slashers as well as the social and critical backlash, it was time to put Friday the 13th franchise and Jason to bed once and for all. And after seeing the classic 1980s slasher The Prowler, he decided to give the job to Joseph Zito. Zito would take the job and then take a portion of his salary and offer it to Barney Cohen to write a screenplay based on a story by Bruce Takao. He would then invite master makeup artist Tom Savini to do the special effects and to kill off Jason once and for all, since after all, he created Jason in the first place. He would begin casting next, and he would gather a group of young, competent people, chief among them a young rising child star named Corey Feldman, to play the protagonist, Tommy Jarvis. So with the cast assembled, the script written, Tom Savini back on special effects, and Joseph Zito in the director's chair, filming will begin in October of 1983 and be set to release in October 1984, but the release will be pushed to April 13th, 1984 instead. So unlike my previous experience with these films, I didn't actually see this on the Friday the 13th marathon on Monster Vision with Joe Bob Briggs, because this is the one that was completely left out because the producers couldn't get the rights to it. And if you want to see that epic Joe Bob rant where he gives the producers hell about not getting it because it has key story elements, go ahead and check that out because it's legendary. And this movie evaded me for years because I didn't see it until I finally got to check it out at my local video store. Because back then you couldn't just order stuff offline and get copies or go out to a store and buy that copy of that movie. You had to rent it, or you had to look up and find a copy at a yard sale. And fortunate for me, I finally got in there on a day where the copy of the movie wasn't checked out. And when I finally got a copy, I was completely blown away. It was so surprising and shocking to me how much better this entry in the franchise is than the majority of this franchise. And to this day, it has remained my #1 movie in the franchise and one of my favorite slasher films of all time. And throughout the franchise so far, the characters and how they're developed and how likable they are and how well they're written has definitely waxed and waned. But there's been a few standouts. You've had Jenny and Paul, Chris and Shelley, and a few here and there. But no cast in this franchise is as well put together and well written as those of the final chapter. They are all written so well and so well developed in the movie that you genuinely care about each and every character in this movie, and you don't want to see any of them die. And just like with the other cast, there are a few standouts. Sarah, played by Barbara Howard, and Doug, played by Peter Burton, are 100% the sweetest couple that we have seen yet. Even more so than Mark and Vicky from Part 2 because of their situation. Sarah and Doug's romance come off as so pure that they generally like each other, and they are literally blossoming lovers, like they actually are falling in love with each other. Whereas Mark and Vicky does come off as sweet, but it's more in the vein of lust than it is in purity and actually liking the person. These two dance around each other's feelings throughout the movie, and when they finally get together and everything seems great, you're so fulfilled with their romance, and then they get snuffed out by Jason, and it's truly tragic. Then you got Jimmy, played by Crispin Glover, which is probably the most memorable character in the franchise, the hopeless lover that just cannot get it right with the ladies. He is most notable and memorable for the dance, the weird dance that he does. It only lasts maybe about 20 seconds, but it's just this really weird, awkward dance. But it was enough to charm one of the Doublemint twins and help him get rid of his girl problems. And for that, everybody in the audience was rooting for. But unfortunately, when he goes to celebrate after getting laid, he goes to get a celebratory bottle of wine, and while looking for the corkscrew, he would meet his fate against Jason. Then you have the Jarvis family, and this might be the first time in the franchise that we are actually introduced to a family that is put in the path of Jason's rampage. Joan Freeman plays Miss Jarvis, and she is like the definition of a good mom. She is that epitome of a TV mom. You have Kimberly Beck that plays Trish. She is our final girl and older sister to her younger brother Tommy. And she is like the best big sister in the world. She is so protective of her little brother, and is refreshing to see that she is not condescending to her brother. She truly cares about him. And their relationship is one that I think all siblings ought to strive for. And she is a fighter. She selflessly throws herself in front of Jason in order to protect Tommy, whether it's rushing up Tommy's aid and smacking Jason upside the head with a hammer, jumping in between him when he's got him cornered, or simply leading him out of the house all the way across the road to another house, all the way upstairs, and even jumping out of a window to get away from him and to draw him away from Tommy. And she gives Jason the business too. Just like I was saying before, she is a fighter. She smacks him upside the head with hammers, she splits his hand in half with a machete, and she even drops a TV on his head. And just like with Jenny and Chris, she definitely becomes one of the best final girls in the entire franchise. And then there's the star of the cast, Tommy Jarvis, played by Corey Feldman, and he was the youngest actor on the set, and for that reason, he garnered a lot of protection and a lot of care from the other staff members. They would look after him and they would take care of him, but most importantly, they treated him like an actor instead of a child. Freeman and Beck particularly took a liking to him, and because of that and their camaraderie off camera, they had perfect chemistry on camera, making the family be very believable. And just like how Trish would do anything to protect Tommy, Tommy would do anything to protect her as well. But him being so small, he's not really a physical threat to Jason, so he decides to use his brain instead. Tommy was modeled after Tom Savini, and because of that, he comes off as the monster kid that likes to build things, that likes to make masks and all different types of creatures and stuff. So he would use this and imply it to try to outsmart Jason, taking a picture of Jason from the news clipping and shaving his head and making himself look as much like Jason as possible so that he can distract Jason. And it worked, and he ended up being the one to finish Jason off. And that wouldn't blemish the terrifying memory that just Jason left in his wake, because in my opinion, this is the best Jason we have gotten so far, and one of the best of the franchise. For the role of Jason, Joseph Zito would call upon veteran stuntman Ted White, who watched the two previous films in order to try to get a type of feel of how the character was going to be. And after watching them, he decided that he was going to do something different with his character. He was going to make him a relentless force, an unwavering, just killing machine that was out to kill everybody here at all costs. And as a result of that, we got a faster, cunning, and more ruthless and meaner Jason. And that produced us one of the scariest and most merciless versions of the character that we had ever seen. And at a height of 6'4" and a very large frame, Ted White becomes the most intimidating Jason to date. Ted White also would not associate or mingle with any of the cast members in a way to not have any familiarity or any kind of relationship with them, just to be this opposing force that none of them had any familiarity with, and they would all be instantly on guard and terrified. Kind of taking the opposite of what the Jarvis family did off screen and kind of come closer together to make a more organic looking family on screen, his methods actually gave us a form of authenticity that we really haven't seen before in this franchise, because everyone there was genuinely terrified of him. Also, he didn't like Corey Feldman. He thought he was a bad behaved kid and just a nuisance. And that led to this on-screen interaction that really rose tension, because according to Ted White, he really was trying to kill Corey Feldman. So it actually paid off, because you can actually see it on film. This would garner sympathy from the audience and make people actually genuinely care about the safety of Tommy. And because it wasn't practice, Again, it was very organic. And just like I said before, Tom Savini returned and he brought the best kills of the franchise with him. For me, he is firing on all cylinders in this movie, and he actually brings some of his best work in slashers to me in this film. You got the hacksaw kill on Axel the coroner, which is just absolutely gnarly. This perverted coroner sitting here watching these exercise tapes, and this very sensual exercise tape, and he's really getting into it. And then out of nowhere, Jason comes up behind him with a hacksaw, slits his throat, and then spins his head all the way around. It's just freaking awesome. You have Kristen Glover's fate, where he's in there looking for the corkscrew to have his celebratory glass of wine after finally achieving his goal and hooking up with one of the Doublemint twins, only to find the corkscrew being jabbed in his hand and then hit in the face with a meat cleaver. Absolutely gnarly. And to follow that up, his body was tacked up almost like he was crucified on the door frame of the house. So when Jason's chasing Trish at the end of the movie, he runs through him and he pulls it off and his hands tear down the middle, and it just looks really incredible. You got one of the Doublemint twins getting thrown out of a window and landed on this car, and although it's not really bloody, the effect of that character getting thrown out and the stuntman hitting the top of the car and all the windows blow out of the car and the roof caves in, it just looked like it was the most painful thing ever. Then you got the character of Samantha out in a raft, and she's out there nude all alone waiting on her dude to come out there, and he comes up from under the water, stabs her through the raft, and that kill is gnarly as well. Then you have poor Doug. Doug was in the shower getting ready to go in there and hang out with his girl Sarah, and Jason comes into the bathroom, bursts through the glass, pins his face up against a tile, and just crushes his face in. And that's one of my all-time favorites, because that kill just looks so freaking incredible. And it was Ted White's favorite as well. Then you have the scene where Trish and Jason are standing off, and Trish gets a hold of the machete, and Jason holds his hand out, and she ends up chopping through his hand. That effect is so freaking gruesome and gnarly as well. Just seeing the hand split in half and moving just gives me the willies just thinking about it. And then you have the cream of the crop kill of the entire movie. Probably one of the best kills in slasher movie history, and that is Jason's death, where Tommy Jarvis goes into the bathroom, takes a picture of Jason, shaves his head, makes himself look like Jason as much as possible, goes downstairs, distracts him. Trish has the machete and she swings at Jason, but she missed, knocking his mask off and dropping the machete in horror at looking at his grotesque face. And then Tommy Jarvis picks up the machete and slaps Jason upside the head with it, going all the way through his head, straight to where his nose is in the middle of his head. Jason falls down, hits the floor. The end of the machete where the handle is hits the floor, and Jason's head just slides down on the handle. And it is absolutely disgusting, and it is awesome. And although another team designed Jason's face and look, they actually designed that look based on what Tom Savini had did in the first film as for the child version of Jason. So it again brings this camaraderie and this a little bit of close continuity with this character that we've kind of been missing. The kills are great. Some of the best of the franchise, if not the best of the franchise in my opinion. The cinematography and the look of this movie are different in my opinion to the other ones, because it has that real gritty, grainy look that is really synonymous with a lot of 80s slashers, and I've always found that very pleasing to the eye. And there's also some really good shots in this movie. There's some crane shots at the beginning that are coming down from where a helicopter is, looking on the scene after the events of part 3, where you have Jason's body in the doorway of the barn and all around the campsite, and you got the ambulances and the cop cars coming in. That shot's really cool. And again, the shot where the twin is thrown out the window and then hits the top of the car, that shot's also incredible. It kind of happens in slow motion once the twin gets thrown out, and just seeing like the glass explode out of the windows of the car and the car just cave in on itself, to me was just fucking awesome. But I think that the most iconic shot of the movie is when Trish jumps out of the window. It's like a little porthole window, and Jason's after her, and he goes out on this little balcony area and he stares out over the balcony. I think that shot is so freaking iconic, and not a lot of people talk about it, but for me it's one of the best shots in the franchise. And once again, we get a great opening credit scene where you have the symbol of Friday the 13th coming at the screen, and once it stops, you have the mask of Jason just coming in, exploding through, and then you have the words final chapter across the mask. And I love this one as well. It's not as good as the third one, but it is just as good as the first two opening scenes. One of the biggest problems that the movie does have, though, is that the continuity problems are kind of solidified in this movie, where you have this movie is these three movies, 2, 3, and 4 are taking place over the same weekend. But then there's things that are said throughout the movie that completely contradict this. You have this character named Rob, who's played by Eric Anderson, and he is the older brother of Sandra from part 2. And allegedly she has been missing for years. And that doesn't add up because she died 2 days prior. So I don't know if it was just something that got missed in the writing, or if it was implying that she ran away from home a few years ago or whatnot. But it still doesn't make any sense because the reports of these murders at Crystal Lake have been all over the news, and there's no way someone who was actively looking for a family member would not have seen those. Then we see the tombstone of Pamela Voorhees, which is the first time we actually find out what her real name is, because for the longest she was known as Mrs. Voorhees. So we see this tombstone, it says Pamela Voorhees, and it says that the year of death is 1979. But the events of the first film take place in 1980. So that's a pretty small error as well, but if you're paying attention in this franchise, you're going to notice it. So the timeline just simply doesn't add up, and just like I said before, if you think about it too much, you're not going to have a good time. So just don't think about it. And as far as the character of Rob, he probably has the runner-up for the worst acting in the franchise. And he's not beating out Chili by no means. But man, his death was not only the lamest death in the whole film because it's all obscured by darkness, but when he is getting hacked to death by Jason with this gardening tool, he is just sitting there going, he's killing me. He's killing me. He just sits there and says he's killing me this entire time. And I'm just going to throw it out there. It's lame. It's not good. It's one of the very few problems that I have with this movie, but that death was absolutely ridiculous and just bad. So again, not as bad as Chili's death, but Rob's death is definitely a runner-up so far. So it got released April 13th, 1984, and it was made with a budget of $2.2 million, and it grossed $33 million. So it was another huge financial success. And of course, critics hated it. They thought it was absolute garbage. Just a nothing movie with just blood and guts and naked teenagers and people getting killed and all that. Just nothing but useless violence. And of course, the most famous quote probably is by the kind of great Roger Ebert, who has called it an irreprehensible piece of trash. And I understand that him and Gene Siskel are two of the greatest film critics of all time. And I understand that the weight that their name and their legacy holds. But man, did they hate some classics. They liked some too. But man, between this movie and The Thing, of them just shitting on them, it's just something that is really hard for me to take them serious after that. It's always been something that's actually bugged me, that them as critics could not separate like different art. They couldn't see something for what it was. They couldn't see that this movie is not supposed to be like a Oscar-winning movie. That's always bugged me about them. But this is a fan favorite as the best in the franchise, and I share that opinion. I believe that the franchise actually peaked with this movie. And if I actually did a ranking right now, this movie would definitely be my number one of the franchise, and one of my favorite slashers of all time. So for me, Friday the 13th, the final chapter, is an essential viewing as a slasher fan, and an essential viewing as a horror fan in general. It is a must watch. So Friday the 13th, the final chapter, gets a 5 out of 5. And with that being the final chapter, this is going to bring this review series to an end. Psych, we all know they made a sequel, and next we will continue this journey with a new beginning. Probably one of the most hated sequels in this franchise. So grab your copy of the final chapter on your way out, and if you like this video, like it, and if you like it enough, please head over to the channel, hit the subscribe and bell button so you never miss a new release. Also, please follow me on all social media platforms so that you can get channel updates, movie news, and all forms of badassery. And remember, be kind, rewind.